UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
You must be getting pretty hyped for your investigation that I think you're going to do tomorrow night at the Belvoir Winery in Liberty, Missouri, right?
Yes, I am super excited. I haven't been on an investigation in quite a while.
Can you tell us a little bit about the winery?
Sure. Belvoir is an event location that happens to be the original complex of the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, which happens to be a secret society from back in the late 1800s. There are several buildings within the complex, but the orphanage is the only one that is currently in use.
Sounds a little spooky. And you're going to be filming it too, and maybe later sharing anything paranormal that you might capture while you're there on the Talking Weird social pages, right?
Yes, that is the goal. It's going to be a public group investigation, so I won't be really able to roam freely. So hopefully I'll be able to catch something. I'm sure I'll be able to catch flashlights going on and off, but it would be nice to get maybe an EVP or something like that.
That would be nice.
But anyways, what about you? I saw a video today on Talking Weird. A new one about you and Fort Thought.
That's right. That's my new little sideshow, Fort Thought. And I'm super excited about it. I won't lie. It's fun because it lets me rant a little bit more than I do on Talking Weird, where although I guess people get the idea of some of my beliefs, I prefer to just give the floor to the guests. I don't really want to be pushing my ideas down anybody's throat. But I think as anybody who checks Fort Thought out will see, it lets me talk even more about those writers and thinkers that have formed a lot of my own ideas. Obviously Charles Fort, who the show's named after, and John Keel and Jacques Vallée and Patrick Harper and other thinkers like that. And I actually expect the show might get a little bit controversial in the weeks ahead, but, tune in and you'll see what I mean.
I can't wait.
Anyway, enough about you and me. Onwards to tonight's guest. He's an author, an explorer, and a researcher from the New York Bigfoot Society. He's also the co-host of that organization's radio show, and his most recent book, Folklore Frankensteins, travels through all 50 US states, recording not just Bigfoot encounters from every state, but also each region's unique history, Native American folklore, and other local cryptids. So I'm delighted to welcome to the show, Kenney Irish. Folklore Frankensteins is such a great title, Kenney. Can you tell me how you came up with it and its meaning in regards to your book?
Absolutely. I get asked this question a lot, and I love it when people ask. I think back to, obviously, when it comes to Frankenstein, we always think of the monster, but in reality, we all know that, in Mary Shelley's classic, that Frankenstein was actually the doctor, but unconsciously, we make the connection with the monster, because in reality, he's really the main character in the story. And I really relate cryptids to the Frankenstein monster. Like the Frankenstein monster, like he wasn't a bad guy. He didn't mean any harm, and he was misunderstood and kind of wanted to fit in. And I kind of look at all cryptids kind of the same way. They are very misunderstood, in my opinion, and they definitely don't mean us any harm in any way. I think if, any type of cryptid ever did kind of come after us or do any type or any form of attack, there'd probably be a reason for it. Maybe there's some juvenile creature that they're trying to protect and get us away from, or, we just came into a sacred area for them. But that's kind of how I came up with it. I mean, a lot of the research that I do, I go back to, where like a lot of the lore kind of began with like the Native Americans. And that's kind of how I came up with the title. I love lore. I love legends. I really associate the Frankenstein monster to what we call today Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or any other type of cryptid that we don't necessarily completely understand.
So, what sparked your interest in cryptids and folklore?
That started at a real young age. I grew up watching, Godzilla and King Kong, and I was a huge Incredible Hulk fan. And it's kind of embarrassing to say it now, but when I think I was like 5, when I'd get done watching the Incredible Hulk, I wouldn't go to bed unless my mom watched me run down the hallway, just like he would run at the end. So it kind of all happened there. And I grew up in northern Vermont. And so, you've got the Lake Champlain monster, Champ. And I'd always heard stories of Champ. And, I've actually talked to some people that have witnessed Champ. And I love Sasquatch. I love all cryptids. But if I had to say one was my favorite, it would definitely be Champ. Ever since I can remember, anytime I was near the lake, the first thing I would do is I would just be looking for Champ. If we drove across the bridge, I'm looking for Champ. So it really started, monsters at a young age. And in all honesty, I think as a young child, I related more to them than anything else.
Have you experienced anything along the lines of cryptids or any type of unknown phenomena?
Yeah, I'd say last summer, there was one evening when myself and the rest of the team that I'm with a team called New York Bigfoot Society. And the founder of the group is also the founder of the Tri-City Paranormal Society of New York. His name is Gary Robusto. Most know him as Gary Hootenholla. And we were out in one of our research areas, and we put up, digital recorders all around. And it's really common to do tree knocks. It's something that a lot of researchers and explorers do. So we did it, and it was probably maybe 45 seconds later we got a distinct knockback. That same night we were walking down a road, and again, I mean, this is out in the middle of nowhere, and it sounded like there was something walking along in the woods next to us. Obviously, it could have been a wild animal. We weren't able to actually see anything with our headlamps, but whatever it was following, was watching us. And, we've had rocks thrown at us, and, we've heard in a real far out distance, some howls. Some we could tell right off the bat what they were, and others, we weren't 100% sure. So I've never had any type of face-to-face with any cryptid, or actually be able to put my eyes right on them. But I've definitely had experiences that I can't explain.
You mentioned Champ earlier, and I know that Katie Elizabeth, who's probably one of the world's premier Champ investigators, actually wrote one of the forwards to your book, along with Ken Gerhard, who's been a guest on the show before, also wrote the other forward. Could you tell us a little bit about how you met both of those guys?
Yeah, no, it's funny because, in this world of Facebook and virtual friendships, that's pretty much how it started. I've always, appreciated Ken's work, and saw, a lot of shows that he was on, read his books. We were friends on Facebook where, I sent him a friend request, he accepted, and, it was just kind of like that. And then I reached out to him and I said, hey, your new book that you have out, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, can I get a copy of that? And, can I get it signed? And he was like, absolutely. And from there, we just kind of started, talking on Messenger and going back and forth. And we just kind of became, friends in that sense. We've never actually seen each other face to face. We would have this year, but with COVID-19 canceling 3/4 of the events across the country, I had 10 or 11 of them scheduled, and they've all been canceled except for 3 right now, which are pending. So, I was looking forward to meeting Ken face to face, but it looks like that's not going to happen this year. But that's how that came about. And we just, started talking, and I ended up having him come on a radio show with me. And we've just, been virtual friends, if you will, ever since then. And I was talking with him, and, I told him about the concept of the book, and he liked the concept. He liked the book. And then, I said, hey, what are your thoughts on possibly writing a introduction and a foreword for it? I told him, I said, of course, I want to send you the whole book at first, because I don't want you just to read a chapter and be like, oh, that's great, and then read the rest of the book and hate it. Because when you write a foreword or an introduction for somebody, you're endorsing it and saying, yes, I back this up. So I sent it to him, and he wrote back. He's like, yeah, this is great. And so he said, what do you want for a word count? And I said, look, you're Ken Gerhard. I said, I just appreciate you writing this for me. So he wrote it. It's fantastic. It was more than what I expected. I knew it was going to be awesome, but it was way beyond what I expected. And as far as Katie Elizabeth, it's funny because it's the same exact kind of scenario where we became friends on Facebook and started talking, via Messenger and Facebook. And I told her I was originally from Vermont, and that's kind of how we became friends. So, Ken was like, yeah, I'll write the foreword for you. And then I'm like, how awesome it would be to have two people write a foreword for me. So I'm like, why not? So I'm talking to her, and she's like, oh man, she goes, I'd love that. And I said, all right. Well, I said, just like with Ken, I'm going to send the whole thing to you. I want you to read it because, again, if you're going to endorse this and put your name on it, let's do this. So I sent it, she wrote back, I love it. Yeah. I want to write a foreword for it. And it was beautiful how everything kind of flowed, because the way Ken opens up his foreword, he does such a beautiful job introducing what I've written. And then from there, going right into Katie's, it's like it picks right up where Ken's left off. And then when hers ends, it's like you're ready for the book. So it was kind of like, God's ordained timing with the way that it went. I couldn't be any more happier with the result. And again, to have, two, such names endorse the book, and, it was just, it's a real blessing.
And your book looks at Bigfoot sightings in all 50 of these United States. And I found it really interesting to read about some state-specific crypto hominids that stood out with their own unique attributes, I guess. For example, can you tell us a little about Alaska's Whipple Creek Screamer and California's Roadside Leaper?
Well, like the Whipple Creek Screamer, yeah, I mean, that was a gentleman that, kind of lived out in the middle of nowhere. And, he had heard, he had heard different sounds and different things like that. But, that one night where he had that interaction, and, he could see the figure in the distance, and the scream just, the way he described it was just kind of like, I guess in a way, kind of melting his face off. And it's one of those things where when they're telling the story of what happened, you can hear it in their voice. You can really, really, feel kind of what they were feeling at that moment. According to him, it was probably, he was saying, right around 8 feet tall, and he just kind of see it like kind of hanging out in like the vegetation. And, he actually took a shot at it. Folks were trying to convince him that it was an actual bear, but he's like, no, this is no bear. I've been living out here for years. So apparently, I guess, that's something that some other folks in the area as well, when he kind of came out and started talking about it, other folks in the area had mentioned that they heard that same type of like scream, kind of like at one point he kind of described it as kind of like a train horn. Mm-hmm. Going off and just being loud and piercing. So that was really, really interesting when he was explaining that to me. And, and he was forthcoming with the details, but at the same time, he was a little reluctant, which is the reason why I went with his story and put it in there. Because there was a lot of people that I spoke with that really wanted to, they wanted to be in the book, and they're throwing all this information out and all this and that. And for me, that was a little bit of a turnoff, because I'm like, I don't know. It sounded like they wanted to talk about it too much. So that was a little concern for me. So I really enjoyed talking with him and writing that chapter. So are you talking about for California, so the Roadside Leaper?
Yeah, that was fascinating too.
Yeah. There's a lot of, road crossings that I hear about all across the country. And this was one where the gentleman was driving down the road. He was on his way to an appointment, just doing his thing. And, as he's coming around a corner, there's a car that's coming towards him, flashing his lights. And he's assuming at that point in time, okay, there's a police officer up ahead. I better, be careful, what I'm doing. And, as he comes around the corner, he sees this figure on the side of the road. And he described it as it didn't necessarily walk across the road like a lot of road crossing sightings happen. He more kind of like leaped across the road, which really for him kind of solidified that, hey, you know what, this wasn't a human, and this obviously wasn't a bear. It more or less just kind of like covered the whole road in one leap, and it was a major route. It was a wide road. He definitely had a lot of excitement in his voice when he was telling it to me. But yet, he also said, there's a lot of anxiety when he talks about it as well, because it's something that when you see once, you can never kind of unsee it. And he still goes down that road. So, every time he's kind of like near that area, he kind of, is like, oh my God, am I going to see this again? What's going to happen? And, so he said he always has, like a small little bit of an anxiety panic attack when he's going down that road. But, to this day, he hasn't seen the same thing ever since.
I think the report in the book that I found most intriguing was the one in Kentucky, the Harlan County Bigfoot. And it involves a female witness who started to have a bad headache, as well as what sounded like, I guess, an onset of an anxiety attack just before she saw the creature. Do you know of any other similar accounts where witnesses seem to have a negative physical reaction or maybe a premonition before, or perhaps the physical reaction during an anomalous encounter, whether it's with a Bigfoot or any other type of cryptid or paranormal being?
Yeah, I've heard multiple encounters where folks have had, weird feelings. There was one gentleman that I was on a radio show and I was co-hosting, and he was saying something about he saw a dog man, and it was as if like the dog man was like telepathically talking to him. I don't really know anything about anything like that, but that was one claim that somebody had mentioned. But I hear a lot about infrasound, and that different mammals and animals can put off that low frequency that we can't necessarily hear, but it can cause like dizziness and headaches, and some people call it kind of like a fright or flight type of feeling. The founder of the group that I'm with, Gary, he's actually experienced infrasound, where I believe his head started to pound, he felt sick, and then he immediately kind of went and kind of had like some anxiety. And it turned into, in his words, a fight or flight, and then it eventually dissipated. And there's a lot of people that have experienced that low frequency. That I guess because like whales will put it off. There's tigers will put it off. We don't necessarily right now know exactly what a Bigfoot is. There's a lot of theories to suggest certain different ways of seeing what a Sasquatch is. But I mean, I've definitely heard a lot about infrasound.
Huh. That kind of leads into my next question, actually, because I think one question that Folklore Frankensteins really begs is this. If people are actually seeing large, hairy hominids in every state of the Union, can these mysterious creatures really be physical beings, or are they something else? I mean, in areas where there are massive tracts of wooded national parks and other forests, it seems plausible that maybe, just maybe, there's a breeding population of such creatures that are hiding and or staying well out of the range of human civilization for most of the time. But to me, it seems less likely, and I would say almost impossible, that such a population exists in very small states with large human populations, say a lot of states out east, or in states with little vegetation, or states that really don't have any areas where such things can hide. Do you have a take on this, Kenney?
You know, there's a lot of different theories that are kind of floating around right now. One is that they're not flesh and blood, that they're interdimensional. There's another one that they could be extraterrestrial, because there's a lot of I've never experienced, but some folks have experienced, seeing like a UFO or strange lights in the sky, and then shortly after seeing a Sasquatch. I'm still, on the flesh and blood side, but what I said earlier in the show about, I like to go back and read, about, what the Native Americans, would say, and what they would always preach about. And, they talked about, them being of flesh and blood and of spirit. So I'm still about 90% on the flesh and blood side, but I cannot rule out that they could be paranormal, ghost-like, interdimensional, or even extraterrestrial. Until I guess we actually, can 100% prove and maybe even have one. I dread the day that we have one, because I know what normally happens when we do have something. They unfortunately, do all kinds of tests on it and it doesn't usually survive. But, it's hard to say. There's so many different theories right now, and there's enough evidence in each theory to suggest that there could be something very well true in each theory. So, I hear, all kinds of different reasoning behind certain things. Like, some folks will ask, hey, I saw this line of footprints and then they just disappear. How is that possible? They've got to be interdimensional, or they have to be, paranormal. They've got to be ghosts. There's definitely different ways of looking at that. Like as far as like footprints disappearing, I kind of did a test where I walked through the woods and, I watched my own footprints and looked back, and there were areas where I left prints, but then there were also areas where I didn't leave any type of impressions, but yet the ground looked exactly the same. So I think sometimes it can come down to what the ground surface is, what's underneath the ground surface. That's one way to look at it. But again, at the same time, I mean, there's so much evidence to suggest that it could be extraterrestrial. It could be, paranormal. So, I'm not afraid to say, I don't know.
Huh. As well as having a Bigfoot report from each of the 50 US states in your book, each chapter, which I think is really great, by the way, includes an overview of the creatures of Native American folklore from that state, as well as many of that state's other cryptids. So other than Bigfoot, and I know you mentioned Champ before, but what are a few of your other favorite monsters from around the country?
I would say, obviously the Mothman, love the Mothman. I love the stories behind it. There's the green-clawed beast. They explain it as kind of like looking like the monster from the Black Lagoon. It's another water monster. And the thing is, when I was writing this book and I was going through, I actually came across some cryptids like I'd never actually even heard of. So it was really neat when I was writing this book to actually come across some of these cryptids, because I'd always been so Bigfoot and Champ focused. Like Illinois has like the Enfield horror, which I thought was really fascinating. And, when I was writing this, I gave in the chapter for Vermont, I gave Vermont Champ because I grew up in Vermont. It was actually a toss-up because New York actually has a law that's been enacted to protect Champ if Champ exists. Yet I gave Champ to Vermont. Although there's Lake George, which is in New York, and there's a lake monster in there that is similar to Champ, and they call her Georgie. It was pointed out that it was actually a hoax and that it wasn't real. Yet, since that report came out and people said, yeah, we made this up, we did this, we did that. Since then, there's actually been sightings from people that have come in from out of state that wouldn't even know it. So it makes me wonder if, saying it was a hoax was to maybe get people in, because maybe people at one point in time stopped coming in because they were afraid. And obviously, you've got towns that, especially like Lake George, that need the money, that come in because it's very seasonal. So Georgie was another one that I really enjoyed reading about and putting in the book.
Kenney, you spoke a little bit before about your involvement with the New York Bigfoot Society. Are you guys actively doing much research at the moment?
We are and we aren't, because some areas we're not able to go into because of COVID. So there's been a lot of areas where we enter our research areas through like certain state parks that were closed, because we'll come in, we'll start out on the trail, but then we'll go off the trail and just kind of bushwhack out to our areas. Gary is more active when he's by himself because he can kind of be stealth and get out there. But we've definitely gone out a few times this year as a team. Gary's gone out alone on his own. So we've definitely been out and about, but not as much as we were hoping we were going to be able to get out due to a lot of the lockdown.
With your reports on Bigfoot, do any of them talk about wooden structures? Is that something you see in your research?
Yeah, we hear about structures all the time. We actually had somebody just recently send us some pictures asking us to look at them. And the pictures they sent, it was definitely clear to us that it was a man-made structure. But we see those all the time. There's a lot of them that, are definitely, it could be man-made, but maybe it's not. But there's some that we definitely see right off the bat, and we're like, oh yeah, that's absolutely man-made. The way that the rope is put through and different aspects like that. And that was myself and Gary, the founder. We were just a couple weeks ago, we were on Coast to Coast AM, and after the show, that's when somebody sent us one of those pictures. And it was definitely, it looks like something, their reasoning for thinking that it could be a Bigfoot was because there was like no garbage around. There wasn't anything that was like people were actually there. But the thing is, I mean, apparently, according to them, this was out in the middle of nowhere. And Gary's a bushwhacker where, he goes out in the middle of nowhere and he'll build, little forts and stuff like that. So he was actually able to recognize a lot of the structure, a lot of parts of the structure that are normal when bushwhackers go out and make different shelters. And he also, pointed out that, somebody that is into doing that and bushwhacking, everything they bring in, they bring out with them. They don't leave garbage. They don't do anything like that because they respect the woods and the animals. So,
So do you believe that the wooden structures are from a Bigfoot? I mean, do you believe in that theory?
I believe that it's definitely possible, unless we actually, or I'm going to say it like this, unless I actually see one building one or actually in one. I'm, a skeptic on it. In everything I look at, I approach from a healthy skeptic point of view, because especially nowadays with, so much technology, it's getting more rigid now. And, there's a lot of people, doing stuff that they don't need to be doing, and then, claiming that it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
And so, that's the hard part. And I'll have people ask me, they're like, what do you think of that? Do you feel like, that makes you look bad, as an explorer and researcher? And I just simply tell them, look, the only person that can make me look bad in what I'm doing is me. If somebody else wants to go out and do something crazy or whatever, I'm not going to let that affect, the work that I'm doing and that the team's doing. The only way that can happen is if we go out and we try to hoax something, or we know something's not legit, but yet we push it like it is. And we won't. If we come across a footprint, but we can't 100% say, like, hey, yes, this is definitely a footprint, we won't talk about it anymore. We'll move on. We definitely, we're not going to post anything that we, don't personally feel strongly about.
The book really captures the local atmosphere of each state as well, with the history and the background and the like. And I almost get this impression that you must have traveled around an awful lot to put this together, particularly because while you mention a lot of classic cases in there, a lot of these reports, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of before. So how did you actually research the book? How did you find those lesser known reports in it?
Okay, yeah. No, and that's another question I love to answer. When I was originally writing this book, I wasn't doing all 50 states. I had like 12 chapters, and I had a cryptid for every chapter. And every time I wrote a chapter, I'd sit back and I'd go, I just regurgitated and wrote the same book that the last person just wrote.
Mm.
I'm like, I got to do something different. And I'm like, I got to challenge myself. What can I do here? And that's the thing. I mean, everybody's writing good books, but, in some cases, it's just kind of like, again, just kind of regurgitating what somebody else already wrote. So I'm like, how can I do something different? How can I challenge myself? So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do all 50 states because, I mean, number one, that's going to be an undertaking as it is, because obviously you got to fact check everything. So I sat there and I said, how can I write each chapter? And I thought to myself, I'm like, if I go to the state of Washington and I give, I'm a speaker there, how would I speak? What's my outline look like? So I grabbed outlines from speaking engagements that I've done in the past, and that's how I wrote every chapter.
Huh.
So for instance, like, I'm from Vermont. Let's say somebody comes in as a speaker and I'm in Vermont. I'm sitting in there. I'm in the crowd, and they get up there and then they come in hot right off the bat. They start talking about the state, talking about the history of Vermont. I'm automatically pulled in. Automatically. I'm like, wow, he knows the state, this and that. And then starts talking about, hey, this famous person was born in this state, not necessarily still living there now, but they were from this state. Again, I'm going to continue to be pulled in. And this is how I would write the lectures that I would give and the classes that I would teach. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do with every single state. So pretty much that's how I wrote every state. Now the encounter, because I didn't want to just like go online and be like, hey, pull this encounter off here or pull this encounter off over here. Again, because it's already been written. It's already in somebody else's book. How can I put something in there that hasn't necessarily been out or been in a book? So I sat there and I brainstormed, and I said, you know what? I'm going to use the internet, but I'm going to use Google Maps. And what I did was I pulled up every single state, and I found an area that was, country, more wooded, if that was the climate that was out there. And I'd find a certain county, and I'd go in and I'd kind of zoom in on it, and I'd look for every little mom and pop diner, mom and pop little country store, and I would simply just pull it up online, call it, and say, hey, I'm writing a book. I've heard there's been some Bigfoot sightings out there. What can you tell me? If the person who answered the phone never had one, they could tell me who in that town had one. If it was a diner, they'd be like, I never had one, but hey, Mark the cook had one. Let me grab him. Or if it was a little town store, hey, Jay or Mariah down the road, she had one. Let me put you in contact with her. So in reality, it didn't turn out to be as hard and as much of a task as I originally thought it was going to be. There were people that I talked to that, again, like I said earlier, it sounded like they just wanted to be in a book. And then there were other people that, they'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen a Bigfoot. I've seen multiple Bigfoots. I'm like, really? Well, how many? They're like, well, hundreds. I'm just like, click. And I'm hanging up, it's like, I want it to be legit. And, again, if they were trying to give too much detail, they're like, hey, yeah, it was 50 yards away. And then I could see the expression on his face and it was at night and all this and that. I'm just like, okay, well, that's just not even lining up. So I definitely had many states where I had to call different areas, but I had a lot of people email me in, the encounters, as well as I talked with them on the phone. So that's actually how I was able to get encounters from all 50 states. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was like, how the hell am I going to get to every single state? But I'm like, this is how I want to write this book. And I just brainstormed and came up with that idea. And again, I mean, every little mom and pop diner you go into, everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everybody's business. And that's how we were able to get these encounters.
What a great idea. And that sounds like it was just a fascinating process. Now, I have something which is as much for me as for anybody else listening. I've been researching lately a little myself on Bigfoot attacks in the style of Ape Canyon or the Ford house attacked by the Falk monster. Are you aware of reports similar to that, either in the Bigfoot field or in any cryptid field?
The only time I really hear about like any type of attacks or over aggression, it's usually like a dogman encounter. I've heard of a few with a Sasquatch. Like there's one in my book, the Tree Banger, where the guy was fishing and there was a Sasquatch, with this huge log hitting a tree. And, so he was thinking again, he was trying to maybe protect like there was a young one around or something. But I mean, usually when I hear any stories about any type of cryptid that's aggressive, it usually goes right back to a dogman. I've heard little things here and there, about Bigfoot banging on doors and the side of houses. And it definitely happens. But again, when it comes to any type of like attacks or aggression, 9 times out of 10, it's a dogman story.
Going back to Bigfoot, I'm kind of curious. I had read somewhere that there are a few states that have laws against shooting a Bigfoot. So do you think that means that the Bigfoot actually exists, or are they just being extra cautious?
It's funny because there's a few different theories. Like in New York, the city of Whitehall, which is considered the epicenter of Sasquatch sightings for the East Coast. I live I'd say about an hour and a half from Whitehall. They enacted a law about 5 years ago, I think it was, where it's illegal to hurt or shoot or kill a Bigfoot. They feel they've had so many different witnesses and sightings and incredible people as well. Like, law enforcement, the captain of the police, they all claim that they saw Bigfoot. Some folks say that they do it because they're small towns and they're trying to like get traffic in, to eat at their restaurants and their stores. But I mean, the sightings in Whitehall, I mean, they go way, way back. They had that going on way before, Bigfoot became mainstream, which pretty much happened in the last like 12 years. But yeah, there's absolutely states, there's towns, there's counties that do that. Like New York isn't a no Sasquatch kill state, but Whitehall, the town of Whitehall, they've got a law in place that it's against the law to hurt any type of cryptid Sasquatch that would be in that area.
You mentioned dogmen before as well, and it's interesting that a lot of people try to claim that maybe when somebody sees a dogman, they've really seen a Sasquatch or vice versa. Do you have an opinion on that?
It's hard because, I would say at a distance, it'd be hard probably to tell the difference. Most people consider, dogmen to be like the werewolf type of creature. I mean, some folks have said that they've seen dogmen and, they're 7-8 feet tall. Others say they're only 6 feet tall. Obviously, you rarely ever hear of a 6 foot tall Sasquatch sighting. It's always 7 feet or above. I definitely think there's misidentifications all over. I think, there's folks that have seen a dogman, or they believe they've seen a dogman, but it was another hunter, So there's misidentification all over the place. But it's one of those things where, unless you're actually there to see it, it's really hard to say. But I would say absolutely that I think there's a lot of misidentifications across the board. So logically thinking, if it's a Sasquatch, somebody might think it's a dogman or vice versa.
Do you have a favorite historical Bigfoot story? Like a classic case from the past?
Yeah, I like the Marble Mountain story. That was the church group. They were out camping, and they, in the distance, walking down a ridge line, they videotaped a what appeared to be a Sasquatch. And what really sticks out for me on that is the fact that one, it was a church group, and the gentleman that was heading it up was also a pastor. So they would have a lot to lose by lying about it. And it's an intriguing video. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend that you definitely check it out. But that one right there, that's one of my favorites. And I'd say another one that's one of my favorites is the Browns video. It was thermal imaging of a Sasquatch walking behind from one tree to another. It was on the show Finding Bigfoot, as well as Strange Evidence. So if you get an opportunity, definitely look that up. The guy's name's Stacy Brown. Him and his father caught the footage. Well, his father caught the footage, and Stacy was there. It was at night. And his dad was just like, "We got to get out of here." And Stacy's like, "What's going on? What's happening?"
Oh, wow. To be honest, I'm unaware of both of those cases. I'm fascinated with Bigfoot, but I'm really not on the inside of the Bigfoot research community at all. And that leads me, I guess, to another question. And this is probably a controversial one. And again, this is something I'm asking for myself because I have such little knowledge on it. I'd never even heard of something called the Bluff Creek Massacre until recently. And I know what it's meant to be, that there was some killing before the famous Patterson-Gimlin footage of multiple Bigfeet. And apparently it was a controversy in the past, but I just happened to see it in my feed re-erupt a month or two ago. Is that something that you're aware of, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, that came up like 12 years ago, and it was pretty much debunked. There's a gentleman who does different video editing, and he moves some contrasting around this and that, and so he said this is a puddle of blood, and I looked at it, and it was the same garbage that came up 12 years ago. So yeah, it pretty much the story behind it is there was a logging company, and they went out with Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson, and they went out and they massacred the Sasquatches that were in the area because they didn't want anybody to know that they were there, because if they did, they would shut down their operation. They'd lose all kinds of money. It came up the first time, I believe, like 12 or 15 years ago. And there's no proof behind it. It's just kind of hearsay. Unfortunately, the gentleman who does a lot of the video editing and everything has a big following. So a lot of people actually jumped on board with it, saying, "Oh, wow, this has got to be true." If he's doing it and he's saying it, and it's not, it's all BS. Bob and Roger went out to try to film a Bigfoot. And, if they were going out there to, just, massacre them and get them out of there so that the logging company could, continue doing what they're doing, why would they videotape one and then just put it up for all the world to see? In my opinion, it's just a bunch of BS there. And as far as the Patterson film, a lot of folks ask me, like, "Hey, what do you think of that video?" And I always tell people, I don't even care, whether it's real or it's not, because again, I get my research and history from where it originated from, the Native Americans who tell the stories, have nothing to gain, and stay true to them. So, it's one of those things where, a lot of people feel this is the gold stamp of Bigfoot, the Patterson film. And I don't really get all tied up with it, because I have more questions after I watch it than I have answers, because everybody that sees a Bigfoot, they're running like 100 miles an hour. This was just kind of lollygagging along. And I don't know, again, back then too, they're coming on horses, you jump off the horses, they got to get the camera ready, and they're still able to get footage like that.
Yeah.
Hey, if it's real, then fantastic. They're the luckiest people in the world. And again, and I'm not saying that it's not, but a lot of people are shocked when I say I don't actually care whether it is or it isn't. They're like, "Well, you can't say that." It's like, no, I can't. I think Bob's a great guy, but I don't really use that film to justify anything that I do.
Yeah, you're one of the few Bigfoot researchers, to be honest, I've ever heard take that tack.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nowadays it's like you've got to be honest, because there's so many people, again, that are out there just faking this and doing that, and you got to be honest about what you do. And again, I'm by no means am I saying it's not real. All I'm saying is that's not what got me into Bigfoot. And to me, it's just another video that somebody took and has it up.
I have kind of an off-the-wall question.
I love those questions.
Since you're a researcher, have you or anyone within the research field dealt with an individual who personally thought that they were metamorphosing into a cryptid or shape-shifting or a shapeshifter?
No, I have not. I expect that to happen someday.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, not yet. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what is the name? What is the name of that? When somebody feels like they're changing. It's like
lycanthropy or something.
Lycanthropy.
Uh-huh.
When they believe that they're actually turning into, like a werewolf, or they've turned into some type of creature. And, it's the show, Destination Truth, with Josh Gates. It was before Expedition Unknown. He actually, somebody, said that I can't remember what it was. They turned into a werewolf or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I can turn into one right now. And he's like, really? He's like, all right, let's see it. So the guy starts going through like this like emotion. And then, Josh is just staring at him like, seriously? And then the guy after, like when he was done, after he had changed back to the human, he's looking around like wiping his forehead like, whoa, what happened? And Josh is like, okay, let's move on.
Oh, that's hilarious. Maybe we'll end it on a darker one, though. When I was reading Folklore Frankensteins, as I've noticed a number of times, I've been reading various native traditions from all around the world, is there's often the idea of some kind of creature that comes and takes children or comes and takes people. And sometimes that has been associated with Sasquatch type creatures. And it always makes me think these days of David Paulides' Missing 411 type research. Do you have any take on the whole Missing 411, I suppose, scenario, or what could be behind it, or if Sasquatch is in any way involved?
I think there's multiple things that are going on there. Like one, there are people that want to disappear and get away from everything and never be seen again and start a new life. I think that's a possibility, as well as, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the woods, whether it's cryptid or it's humans. I mean, in my opinion, the scariest thing to come across in the woods is another human being. Mm-hmm. Animals a lot of the time, will run away from you and not want anything to do with you. But, with folks, going out in the woods and then disappearing, I'm always concerned that, it could have something to do, and I hate to say it, they came across some drug traffickers. They saw something that was being grown that wasn't supposed to be, and they were caught. In reality, I think a lot of it probably has to do with, some folks wanting to start over somewhere else, and others possibly running into something that, seeing something that they possibly weren't supposed to see, come across some human traffickers, and they saw something that they shouldn't see. And these groups make these people disappear. I mean, there's a lot of, there's mob activity. I mean, when they make people disappear, a lot of the time they'll bring them out in the woods to make them disappear. If you're out hunting and you come across something like that, you're going to disappear if they see you. Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is probably man, but, who knows? I mean, I've never encountered, any type of cryptid that's tried to, tear me apart. There are stories about that, but, again, for me, the scariest, thing to run into in the woods is another human.
Yeah, I'd say so. I lied. One more question. Kenney, do you have another research project and or another book coming up? And if so, what's it going to be on?
Oh yeah, no, we've got some new tactics that we're starting to roll out in the field. Some of it has to do with kind of going back to a lot of the rituals that the Native Americans did. So we're actually starting to do those out in the woods, which is fun. But I'm not going to go too deep into that. But And then on the other end, yes, I actually do have I'm as of tomorrow, July 3rd, Folklore Frankensteins 2 is actually going to be start written.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's the same concept, but it's going to be very different. This one isn't going to kind of be focused around Bigfoot. This one's actually going to be international. Right now, the title that I'm looking at is Folklore Frankensteins 2 International Lore.
Oh, that's great. Well, let's get you back on when that's out, because I'd love to chat to you again. You were a great guest.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate you reaching out to me and having me on. I definitely enjoy it, especially nowadays, again, with, every event canceling,
Yeah.
I'm trying to, get on and, definitely, meet new people. And, the radio shows have really been a good time, and, built a lot of relationships with, different hosts, and, been able to network and, help get, different guests on different shows. And it's just been a lot of fun.
I enjoyed chatting with Kenney. He had some very intriguing stories about cryptids and folklore. Kenney's book, Folklore Frankensteins, is available from Amazon.com. Visit Kenney's official website at kwirish.com. Of course, you can always find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. In fact, head on over to Talking Weird's channel on YouTube. There you'll find the first episode of Dean's new 5-minute video series, Forethought. Check it out and leave him a comment. And if you enjoyed this episode of Talking Weird, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Next week, we're delighted to welcome Shannon LeGros, host of the popular Into the Fray podcast and the Small Town Monsters docuseries on the trail of UFOs. We'll be chatting about her latest book, Beyond the Fray, Paramalgamation, which covers everything from goblins to wendigos and all kinds of inexplicable paranormal experiences in between. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.